I'm Amy Thomas. I'm in the Federal Finance Unit. My name's been mentioned in vain a few times this morning.
With love.
With love, I guess. We're going to get started back from lunch if all of our Zoom folks are ready. And if y'all can't hear me, I'll have to let me know, because apparently I have to clip this to my nose. Okay, so what I was asked to do is kind of talk about several different topics. So I've kind of broke this into some parts. And if we need to speed up or slow down or interject something, we can. But I'm going to start with indirect cost, which is near and dear to my heart because I've talked about it a lot. If you were at the summit last year, you've seen a lot of this, and I apologize for the repeat, but it's my favorite. So indirect cost in general is indirect over direct expenses. That's the basic calculation. We use all funding sources, state, local, and federal, to calculate your rate. We have, I gave a handout with the presentation that's classification of costs, so you can see what's indirect and what's direct. There are some costs that are completely excluded, they're not used at all. And then there are some costs that are unallowable. Those are always going to be direct expenses. They're always going to go on the bottom of the fraction, no matter what their function or object code is. But it's federal money, right? So we can't make it that simple. So we have tried to make it simpler. Our previous method for calculating LEA rates was a fixed with carryover method, which meant we do that indirect over direct expense fraction, but then we had to look backwards 2 years ago to see what your rate was compared to what those actual expenditures are now and do an adjustment up or down. So that was the carry forward. And that was causing a lot of swings in some places, because if you were extremely low one year and then this year, that meant I had to raise you up, and then it seemed like it would rebound and go back down and go back up and go back down. Plus, it made it very, very difficult for our LEAs to actually check to see how that rate looked in their real data right now, because this carry forward thing was such a strung out, long process. So last year we went back to negotiations with USDE and we got a new methodology approved. Now we're doing a predetermined with a discount. And we do the indirect over direct, and then we just take 95% of it. So it's much cleaner, which means you can check me. That also means if you think your rate is too high or too low, or if you think there's something wrong, we can actually drill into it and you can make changes to your coding in current year expenditures to hopefully get it back on track. So I think it makes it much more transparent, and I welcome anybody to run their own calculation and compare to what we come up with. If there's an error, we'll fix it. But if there's a coding problem, it helps identify it going forward on your end. Subawards are still a part of our methodology. They always will be. The reason they're a part of it is because what's considered a subaward does not benefit, is what the word the feds use, to the same extent as your other costs. Meaning you don't have as much overhead when you outsource part of your program. It doesn't cost you as much to do it if you're writing a check and having somebody else do it for you. So they don't think you should recoup as much indirect cost on that expense as you do some of your others. So we talk a lot about subawards. None of our answers are very satisfactory because we can't give you a hard and fast, this is and this is not a subaward. It's very subjective to the circumstances in your district for that year. So we do a lot of back and forth when somebody calls and says, is this a subaward? We start asking questions. Well, think about this, think about that, think about this. What's a subaward in one district might not be a subaward to another. Some of the things that we get asked about a lot are substitute services like subteach. That is not a subaward because it's not program specific. You are not hiring that entity to achieve a specific program objective. That is a district-wide contract that you've entered, and if you need a second grade teacher today, they send you one, and if you need a high school algebra teacher tomorrow, they send you one. It's not achieving something specific for a specific program. Some of the places that we actually do see subawards in some cases are speech therapies, OTPTs, those types of arrangements where you might contract with an outside vendor to provide that service that you're required to provide under special ed, and you just write the check. So a subaward is basically you have almost nothing to do with it. You are charged with accomplishing it, and you just outsource it. You write the check, pay somebody to do it for you. Of course, that means we can use the first $25,000 of that expense for that year in your rate, and you can use it in your recovery when you charge your indirect costs. And I'm going to have an example here in a minute, because I know subawards are kind of a hot topic, and I'm hoping my example might help clear the difference between what is and what is not. As Annette said earlier, you've got to budget it if you're going to charge it, because you're going to get in trouble if you don't. So if you have any inkling that you want to charge indirect costs this year, make sure you get it in your budget on the front end. There are actually kind of like two categories of expenses. There's administrative costs and there's program costs. Administrative costs are kind of those overarching management costs of running a program. Program costs are directly tied to the actions to achieve the objective, like tutors, classroom supplies, and those types of things. Administrative costs are more coordinator salaries and office space and those types of things that you still have to have, but they're not directly engaging in the actual activity. Indirect costs are a subset of that admin portion. So if you're running a federal program that has a limit on what you can spend administratively, so I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but if you've got a federal grant that says you can only spend 5% on admin costs, indirect has to be part of that 5%, not in addition to, it's not in replacement of, it's included. All of your other admin costs have to be itemized in the grant. Indirect costs are a transfer over to your operating. It's to compensate for the overhead costs that you incur that you can't charge directly to the fund, like your light bill. Unless you have some super duper meter that can tell you how many kilowatts of electricity that light bulb used for Title I, I don't think Jane's going to let you pay the light bill. But the truth is, it did cost you some electricity to run Title I. That's what indirect cost is for, is to try and compensate for some of those unitemized costs that you have. And that is the only money that the feds are going to let you transfer out of the grant and into your operating without itemizing what it's for. That's the only one. Everything else that's admin will be charged directly to the fund and will be clear what it's for. They want to know what the money's spent on. So administrative costs might be your coordinator. It's always going to include your indirect if you take it. It could be office supplies or things that don't directly provide the program. And like I just said, indirect costs are, I think of it as overhead. It's, for example, I'm an indirect cost at the agency because I work on a bunch of different stuff. The bookkeepers in the room are probably indirect costs because unless you want to track every minute of your day on what program you're working on, it's probably not feasible to itemize your salary out by program, because every time you answer the phone or open a piece of mail, you're probably changing programs. So you're probably an indirect cost, but there is an expense to the district, so you're probably falling into this category. And program costs would be tutors. So I've come up with this example, and I'm so proud of my example. because purple prom dresses are my thing. If you ever call and ask me what you spend your money on, I'm going to tell you, you can buy purple prom dresses. And then you're going to call Jane and she's going to say, stop calling me. Seriously, I made up this example so that it is so far-fetched you can't possibly think it is real. I came up with, they gave me $3.215 million for purple prom dresses. And I came up with this grant budget. So this is the front end of the program. This is what I'm going to do with my grant. You will notice that my indirect cost of 3.68% is in my total admin, and I can only spend 5% on admin. So you see how it's in there. And then I've got a stylist, consultant, professional services, student materials, and a prom night. My stylist consultant is I'm going to go hire this agency that does shopping services, and they're going to help our students pick out their outfits for prom night. They're going to help them coordinate shoes and tuxes and dresses and ties and all that good stuff. Professional services are going to be, I'm going to set up the gym, and we're just going to bring in this big company, and they're going to do all of the hair and makeup and nails and things for prom night. But it's one company, and they're just going to kind of come in and set up stations. Student materials, that's the actual clothes. That's the tuxes and dresses, socks and ties and all those things. And then prom night is going to include student meals and transportation. Now, I'm going to do 8 different contracts with some limo services in my town, but I'm going to make sure they're all under $25,000, 1-to-1. All right, so there's my total budget. So prom comes and goes, and now it's time to figure out, what did I do? So these are my actual expenses, same categories as my budget was laid out in. You notice my indirect cost line is blank, so I've got to figure out how much I can recoup. You see how much I've spent. So how much can I charge an indirect? I can use my entire grant coordinator salary and fringe. I can use all of my supplies. My stylist consultant. Notice I'm using all of that because I'm not considering that contract as a sub-award. Here's why. Because I had to send somebody from my staff with them every time they went shopping with the students. I've got a dress code. And I got to make sure my school is covered under my dress code. And so my staff was heavily involved with all of these little shopping experiences. We had to make sure everything was purple because that's the grant guideline. If it comes back pink, we're in trouble. So I don't think that my stylist consultant is a sub-award because we were actively engaged. We had a lot of administrative effort towards that part of reference. Now the professional services, you see, I did limit it to $25,000 because I can't do hair and makeup. So I just pretty much wrote the check and said, y'all handle that. It'd be fine. Y'all just do that for me. Student materials, I'm using all of it because they shopped every which way Sunday. There's no above $25,000 in any one spot. Everybody kind of did their own thing. And then my prom night, remember I'm using 8 different limo services, but I made sure they were all under 25. That limo service would be a sub-award. If it had been above 25, I would have had to cap each one. So if either any of those 8 came to 30, I would have to limit it to 25. You see the difference between what is a sub-award and what is not? Questions about sub-awards so far? I usually get one. Yes, ma'am.
I think I know the answer. You couldn't use one vendor and break it into 8 contracts because wouldn't you have to aggregate that data generally?
I believe so.
Repeat the question.
So the question was, can you use one vendor and break it into 8 contracts? And with that's kind of circumventing, that's kind of playing the game. Now, the caveat would be if that contract were different functions. So if I'm going to hire one vendor, but they're going to do this objective, this objective, this objective, this objective, that might give you a little more allowability to do that with, but the burden of proof would be on you.
So what I usually do every year, I run a report of it and pull that data and aggregate it together.
She gets it close to that. Am I good enough?
Okay.
Close to her.
All right, so every year, usually I run a report at the end of the year, a vendor report, and then I dump that in Excel and aggregate that data by vendor. And then I give it over to my program person and let them review it and see, you know, were these consultants, what would you consider that?
I think that's a good point. This is not something that your bookkeeper can determine on her own. If a bookkeeper could determine that just based on expenses and coding, I could do it for you from my desk and not have you fill out those stupid little forms that y'all have to send. But it's more than numbers. And a bookkeeper doesn't know how much administrative effort or how much an individual staff member was part of the program. Like on the special ed stuff, some of the things that I tell people to consider are, you know, who does your billing? Who does your scheduling for your students to come in? Who, you know, is it pretty much they just come in, they do their own thing? Then that's a subaward. But if your special ed staff, if your LEA supervisor is heavily involved in coordinating all of those activities and doing all that bookkeeping, then it's possible that very well might be not a subaward for you because you are contributing a lot. Your district resources are getting used a lot for that implementation. But to Don's point, a starting point is you run a full expenditure report and you figure out who's above 25 because that knocks out a bunch that you don't even have to think about. And then you sit down with those that are above 25 and go, okay, what happened here? Who did what? Do we think that is or not? And they just asked for me to give you the transfer for indirect costs. It's just like any other transfer, it's just a little bit different function and object, but same mechanics. Yes, ma'am.
Brian and I think that account number may have changed. Before you tell everyone.
Which
That's
one?
in there? That's 68.
The 68. Yeah, 410 is.
So we got rid of,
Okay.
yes, sorry.
The coding is correct, Zoom folks. I feel like I'm talking to Charlie.
Like Charlie.
Yeah, Charlie. Okay, the next thing they asked me to talk about was maintenance of effort. Do we have any questions about indirect costs before I move on? I feel like I gave y'all whiplash. Either that or you're in a chicken coma. Okay, maintenance of effort really hasn't changed much over the years. ESSA kind of relaxed it a little bit because now they let you fail twice before you're penalized. So that's kind of nice. But the actual math behind it is really the same. And what I'm going to talk about today pertains specifically to ESSA funds. IDEA funds have their own maintenance of effort, and I am not talking about that. Okay, it has different requirements, different expenditures, and special ed unit does that, so I'm not going to get in that lane. So everything I say, please put it in the context of ESSA. You have to spend 90% of what you spent in the prior year from state and local funds. So the point of maintenance of effort is they want to make sure that you're still kicking in as much as you did. They don't want you taking any extra federal money and using it where you used to use state money. So that's their word. They don't want you to slack off on the state side depending on how much federal you use. The difference now, like I mentioned before, is you can fail twice in 5 years before you're penalized. When you are penalized, it is a reduction to current year allocation. So if you miss that 90% threshold by 2.7%, then I'm going to back off 2.7% of this year's allocation. That's the penalty. And it's in, Annette, help me, Title 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So the penalty applies across all of them.
One day.
And 1D,
Thank you.
if they get delinquent. But there is a waiver. There's always an exception to the rule. If you've had some sort of exceptional circumstance, natural disaster, reorganization, or if we can demonstrate that your LEA has got serious financial decline, USDE may grant a waiver. But please know that is not an ADE decision. We gather your data, we submit it to USDE, and they come back with yes or no. If you do get a waiver, you are considered having met MOE for that year. Calculations, you take all of your expenditures for state and local, and we can do it in several different aggregates. So you've got several shots at meeting it, and you don't have to meet it any which one way as long as you get one. So we look at total expenditures 2 years ago to last year. You're at 90%, you're good. If not, then we go look at total expenditures per ADM 2 years ago to last year. You're at 90%. Same thing with ADA and enrollment. So if any of those parameters would give us a pass of getting you to the 90%, then you pass MOE. These are the expenditures that we include, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell you, I pull ones and twos from our bookkeepers in the room. That gets me state and local. Now, there's a few things that do come out of that, so sometimes it's easier to look at what's not included rather than what is. These are the things I pull out. If you have any of these expenditures in your ones and twos funds, I pull them out before I calculate them. Yes, ma'am.
Tell them about. It's like
Once every time. That period. I know it's period. I didn't know there was. I suspect if the same LEA started asking for a MOE waiver year after year, they would probably at best. This is Kathleen's slide, so we're gonna skip over this. She's gonna get it. I'm staying in my lane. Any questions about MOE? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, a question submitted. What fund did you pull?
For MOE, we pull all ones and twos, so all your 1000s and your 2000s. Kathleen, you correct me if I say any of this wrong. But that's state and local, right? Okay. Year-end close is the next topic that I was kind of asked about, and we're going to go into, of course, opening the new year. We put out a commissioner's memo every year that kind of lays this little bit of a schedule out for that given year and gives you specific dates, but you're getting a preview because I put them in. And you're going to hear Kathleen say this, but apparently it bears quadruple repeating. This is the time of year when it is crucial that the program staff and the finance staff are working together. Because if there's a disconnect and that year closes, it's going to cause problems, and it could very easily be fixed right here. So always, always, always work together. You don't have to like each other. You don't have to go to lunch. You don't have to tell each other's kids' stories. You just got to work together. And Annette mentioned like the payroll stuff and the e-finance budgets and getting the approved InduStar FGM budgets. At the end of the day, those need to match in e-finance because that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where your expenditures are recorded. So you want to make sure that budget is lined up with what you had approval to spend, so you stay out of trouble. That's where that communication also comes in. If you don't tell your bookkeeper, oh, I forgot I moved Jane Green's salary over here, it's not getting moved. Or if, like we talked about transfers earlier, you do a transfer in the FGM system, but the bookkeeper never knows about it, it doesn't actually get done and get any finance. So those are the types of things that have to get communicated. June 13th will be our last warehouse pull for reimbursements in the fiscal year. That doesn't mean you can't spend money from June 13th to 30th. You just won't get reimbursed for it for a little bit. June 13th is when we'll make our last pull. You can do journal entries for non-salary expenditures through cycle 9 on 31. Sorry. And not do journal entries for salary. Don't do that. Once you're done, you've moved everything around, the bookkeeper and the federal coordinator have got everything lined up, everything matches, we've done everything according to our plan, our approved budget, everybody's happy. Then it's time to do accruals. You accrue to a zero balance only. You do not accrue your full allocation. You do not accrue your full budget. You accrue only to get you to zero. Huh?
Not a positive.
Not a positive, that's right. Because April's gonna call you. And she's gonna say, you over accrued, I need you to fix it. And you only accrue zero. You don't know. That's right, you don't wanna over accrue because again, we're gonna call you and say you overspent. You gotta do something. If you do have a positive ending balance that is not from an accrual, that's okay. You could, if you had to move journal entries, some expenditures out, and now you've got cash on hand, you just leave it sitting there. It'll roll on over. It'll show up as a beginning balance next year, and that's fine. That's completely fine. You don't have to put it on a payable. Is that where they put it? If they're acting like they're going to send it back to me, they put it on payable, right? Not an account. Sorry. Don't do that because we lose sight of it. Just leave it where it sits and let it roll over. So when it comes time to open the new year, first thing I want you to do is reverse all those accruals to the exact. September 12th is when we will start reimbursements again. So June 13th is the last one. September 12th is when we pick back up. Why? Because you have until September the 10th by state law to do a final close. So we wait until everybody's done. Dust is settled, and then we go figure out how much do we owe you to get you to June 30. So we're going to send you a payment for your final FY20 expenditures. And then we pick up and we do year-to-date expenditures from July 1 to September 12th. So you'll get 2 rounds of payments in September. In between those 2 payments is where preliminary carryover lives. And you're going to hear April Cooper, in case y'all don't know her, she works in my unit. She's going to do a presentation at the summit on carryover. Shameless plug. She's going to talk about proof of obligation and liquidation and all that fun stuff, so don't miss it. But that's where carryover lives, right in between those 2 payments. September 30th is the last day for you to spend any expiring or excess money that you are carrying over without having to document it to us.
Spend your money so you don't carry over. Please spend your money and spend it allowable expenditures. Please spend your money.
That's her motto in the office.
Spend your money.
Spend your money.
Please.
Allowable
Expenditures.
because that proof of obligation and liquidation becomes very cumbersome.
It's
For
painful.
you guys, for us, it's just,
Please spend
if
your
you can
money.
avoid that, do it. So September 30th for any expiring or excess. After that, we fall into our regular warehouse pool, second Saturday of the month. Just so happens this September is the second Saturday of the month. That doesn't always happen in September for us. It just depends on how the calendar falls. But because we have to wait till after September 10th, so it just depends on when that Saturday hits. Second Saturday of the month. to keep money coming, and we had a conversation with the superintendent not too long ago about this. When we send you money, we need you to receipt it. If you don't receipt it by the time we pull again, we're not going to send you any more. We can't really see your ending balance if we get that money. So it's really important that as we start sending you reimbursements, you get that money on the books so that that cash flow just keeps coming. And we're going to start watching those positive ending balances month to month. It is completely okay if you find something during the year and you need a journal entry and it causes a cash balance. I want you to make sure your expenditures are, I want them to be in the right spot. If you end up sitting on some cash for a couple of months, we're probably going to call you and say, hey, we're going to need you to send that back to us for now. You're not losing it. It's still your money. We're just going to put it back in the bank for you because the feds don't like interest. And when their money sits still, they start getting a little antsy. And that's the reason we're on reimbursement to start with, is to avoid all that. So if you do get one of those emails or phone calls, don't panic. Assure your superintendents that nobody's in trouble, you didn't do wrong. We're just trying to manage that interest liability so that none of us have to go through that. And December the 12th, if you do have expiring or excess money, you don't get it spent by September 30th, which means you didn't take April's advice.
Spend your money.
And you now had to turn in purchase orders, invoices, copies of checks. That December 12th data pool, second Saturday in December, drop dead last day, I can capture expenditures to that old money. So if you send me a purchase order October 15th and say, I'm going to spend it, but you don't get it spent by December the 12th, you've lost it anyway, because it dries up. After that, we can calculate final carryover. The only changes between preliminary and final carryover is if you had any money dry up. You've lost any for expiring or excess. Otherwise, it stays the same. It's still a June or July 1 balance. It's just adjusted for any money that we had to cut off. I think I've already said all that. Okay. The last thing that we were asked to talk about was where to find stuff on the website. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now that we're going to show you where it's at today, but we are, as we speak, making major changes to our part of the website. So all of this is probably, all the information will still be there, but it's going to be in a different location. We'll try to get very clear communication out when that happens. Essentially, we're trying to blend state and federal funds so they kind of live in one spot for you guys.
Today it's called federal funding.
It's going to take a minute. Yeah, we're still under federal funding for now. So this is where all of our information is posted, our contacts. You can find allocations, your carryover, prelim or final, whichever one we're in at the moment. Federal fund statements are our baby, our pride and joy, and April just got February 2020 put out there. So we're going to open one of those up because this is something we think would help communicate programs to bookkeepers. Because federal programmers usually don't have access to eFinance or don't want access, or please don't make me look at eFinance, and that's okay. And our bookkeepers don't really look at InduStar and FGM. You know, please don't make me, I don't want to. So this is a way, these are like snapshots out of eFinance to let the federal program person know what's in there and then be able to compare it to what they know is in InduStar.
Can you look at it?
Huh?
Can you open it? Yeah.
We try to do this about every quarter. So if you do have a very good communication pattern between the two of you, probably have more up-to-date processes to do this. But if that's kind of a challenge, then this is cool. This is also something you quickly show your superintendent if he kind of wants to know where you stand. We have it by source of funds. The first little block up here says funding amount. That gives you your carryover, your allocation. That should be your total budget for the year. according to what our numbers show. If you don't show the same number, call us. Let's figure out why. The second little spot says eFinance board report. That's just a really quick shot of what we've sent you, what you've spent, what you've transferred. The most important thing that I have found in that section are the transfers, because if the coordinator says I did a transfer and the bookkeeper didn't know it and hadn't entered it into eFinance, you're not going to see it on there. And so that's a really quick check of, did I not tell you I wanted to transfer my title over? So that's just a snapshot, is it in there or not? And then the remaining funds with the obligation dates. The other side is the eFinance details. So this is budget stuff. So to Annette's stuff about 10% variance and making sure that what you've gotten approved in per unit has been translated into eFinance. This is where you look. This is it's not nitty gritty detail, but it's close. If you don't have salaries in there and you know you're supposed to, then there needs to be some communication between the federal program coordinator and the bookkeeper. Hey, we missed something somewhere. And we've done it by fund. So this is one of our pride and joys, and April works really hard on it. What else do we want to show on the website?
You want to talk about, do you want to hit on the funding notification, the changes? It will be next week.
Indirect cost is out there, so we've got examples of sub-awards. We've got the sub-award form out there, and your indirect cost rates are out there. Maintenance of effort. So once you have passed maintenance of effort, and a year later the auditor's in your office going, I need proof that you passed MOE, and you can't find that piece of paper, you can go get it off our website. Same thing on Title I comparability. Annette gives us those letters, so we post those out there. So if you can't get your hands on it fast enough for your auditor, you can go get it, print it off, and hand it to them. And student account data, you know, SAM.gov. Anybody? SAM.gov. This is the queen of SAM.gov. If you call and ask about SAM.gov, this is who I'm going to have you talk to.
My baby.
It's her baby. And Jane let us know that there's some changes coming to that too, from the federal level. Not rolled out yet, but apparently they're taking that up too.
None of those numbers are out there. I keep watching.
Yeah.
It's coming.
But
I'll let you know.
we keep a list of her expiration dates out there. So, and she starts sending out those emails like once a month and says, hey, these districts need to start getting ready to update their SIP.gov. If you're not sure, you're not on that list, but you can't remember when you expire, she keeps a list out here so you can look yourself up. And our student count data is where we post the census data from USDE. The census data for next year's funding is out there now. We posted all about that a while back ago. The special ed student counts are out there, and our state level poverty data is out there, what we use for poverty parameters in our federal functions that are not census. So if you ever want to see what we have, and then if that doesn't look right, call us, we'll try and get to the bottom of why you think it's different, what we've got. If we need to fix that, we will. We haven't gotten December 2019 special ed accounts, but they're coming. Yeah. So I've got a link to our website on there. Again, it will be changing very, very soon. In the meantime, here's our contacts directly. Myself, April Cooper, and Mahogany couldn't be here today. She's also in our meeting. Free to call either of us. We are within shouting distance of each other, so if one of us doesn't know the answer, we usually tag team it. So it's fine. Call one of us. And I went ahead and put the applicant help desk on here because you guys talk to them a lot, and Ms. Kathleen wants us to make sure as a person. So I think I'm done unless anybody's got more questions for me.
There's none.
Next up.
Federal fund statement. We work hard to keep that updated. It was originally designed for the federal program coordinators because they don't always have access to e-finance, but we only get it out every 2 to 3 months. Locations are not on there. Any of the building levels are not. They are not. Because
It's on our wish list. We just haven't figured out a way to mechanically make it.
those are harder. Because you have to drill down and you have to pull a separate Cognos report to pull that in there. That one's hard.
Do you want this or do
Do you want the clicker?
Yeah. They have to think about it. Hello. Testing. Yeah. Okay. Did you say introduce myself? I'm Kathleen Crane. I'm with Financial Management Systems with the wonderful AppScan or AppScam or whatever you call it, as you know. This has been a great meeting so far. All of our time is limited and we all have so much to do and we can't. I thought this morning, I cannot spend a whole day at Arch Ford. I'll show up at noon and then I spoke with Ms. Coughlin and it's been great. I'm glad I've been here because it is good. It's a great idea for all of you who had the idea to get us all in the room together because we do. And I realized it even more, speak a different language. I heard French and German and a little bit of English today, and then finally my number language. And so even at the department, we speak different language. I'm number. I hear numbers, and my eyes were kind of clouding over as I heard all those words this morning. But it's great. And so I've just got about 30 more slides for you. I know you're still perky. Not really. I'm going to dumb it down for me and tell you what I think I heard and some simple clues. And Annette and Jane, correct me if I say anything stupid or get it wrong. Maybe I'll go over my slides right quick and then I will go into my analogies of words. So we talked about salary redistributions, and this morning I was hearing, I learned a lot about federal grants management system. I know nothing about that, and like Amy was saying, most of the time I don't want to know any more about that because if I need anything, I call them. And so I think that's kind of why programmers and business managers are. But the information I can tell you, what I was hearing this morning is you need to get everything corrected that you can correct by May the 1st. So we're going to look at reports in a minute, and business managers, you know what reports you like, and you know as much or more than I do about reports that are there and reports that are available. But start right now looking at those reports. The ledger report totals and the report totals, the report that comes out, we call it debt dis. That's a funny name for a report, but it comes out of payroll and it lists it by person. So when you look at that ledger report or the fund balance report and you've got $1,500,000 whatever dollars in salary, then you want to say, well, man, I didn't plan on spending that much. I'm over budget. Let me see who all I've paid. If you'll get that payroll report, it'll list person by person.
it should match to the penny. And if you paid a net out of that fund, Title I or whatever, and oh, she was only supposed to be 50% out of there, if you can get that fixed now, let the business manager know when you look at those reports, and let's get a payroll redistribution done before May the 1st. So your budget and your expenditures are right in both places. I'm on the right track. But keep in mind that you can only do this payroll redistribution for a person for any given check or period of time, one time. So you can't look at that report and say, oh, business manager, I want Annette's salary redistributed 50% to another state fund. And then 2 weeks down the road, or June the 1st, say, oh, I got some money left. I wish I'd have left 75% in there. I'm going to put it back. You can't do that. It's a one-time thing. So look at your reports, look at the ledger, look at your budget, look at what you've spent, look at who you've spent it on. Frequently, I would say, as frequently as you can, since I can tell you have so much time. And compare those up, but keep in mind that you can only do it one time. I'm hearing that you need to get it as perfect as you could by May the 1st. As far as e-finance and salary redistributions, you have until June the 30th, the calendar date, June the 30th, because any redistributions, no matter if you do it, if you're still in period 12 on July the 6th, and you think you can do a payroll redistribution and it'll be dated June the 30th, it will not. It takes on the calendar day transaction. And so they must be done by midnight, June the 30th, any payroll redistributions. Any questions on payroll redistribution? Cannot move salary with budget with journal entries, as that's been said a couple of times. So it's got to be payroll redistributions. You've got to look at those people who you've got and make sure they're getting paid who you want. And again, as we mentioned, we want to communicate with one another because we do speak different languages, as I said. Annette and I have to help each other translate. She's multilingual. She speaks more numbers and words than I do, but if she starts telling me too many words, I'll say, wait a minute now, are you talking about Fund 6, blah, 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 or, you know, give me the number, give me the, is this allowed? Well, they can spend such and such and such, if it's such and such and such. I want just the fund, function, and object. Just break it down for me. And so when you send me an exception and can I spend this? I don't know, because I don't know what your program allowed. So they're the ones that are going to approve your expenditures. So I'm not as big a queen as you think I am, so some of you. So even though our payroll redistributions are completed by June the 30th, kind of another wrap up and summary of what we're talking about. You're going to close your year, business managers, most of you by June 30th or the first or second week in July. When you close fiscal year 20, it opens up a period 13, and you have until you submit, the business people do, to make other corrections in the fiscal year. And that's kind of what Amy was referring to too. If those expenditures are changing for Title I or whatever, you might wind up with a positive balance because you might journal entry out part of purchase services or part of supplies, or you might say, I have money left here, and did I spend some money in a state fund for supplies that would qualify over here, and I can move that expenditure over here. So you do have from the time the fiscal year end closes until the district submits cycle 9, which cycle 9 opens August the 15th and closes August 31st. So you can be making journal entries to move expenditures, allowable expenditures, qualified expenditures among funds until cycle 9 is submitted. So it may be August the 17th and it may be August 31st. If your district submits the cycle August the 20th, you can't be making journal entries August 31st. Typically, August 31st is the very end. One or two districts a year may request permission to reopen the prior year because it has to be audit checks to make sure that the year process is closed the exact same day and time that the cycle is submitted. By law, you have until September the 15th to resubmit cycle 9. Now, there are very few people, if not anyone in this room, that's ever going to want to fall in that category of having to resubmit. Man, if I make it and get all this correct by August 31st, I want to be done. But to be safe, that we get the final, and that Amy gets all the final numbers, and then all your people see all the final numbers. We do have to wait until September the 15th before the final load to the warehouse is done and start producing those reports. But most likely your district is, the door is closed, the tomb is sealed August 31st. So look at reports, review, communicate as much as you can between now and May the 1st. Then look at reports again as many times as you possibly can between then and the time the cycle closes. This was just a little document, and I think that may be posted on AAEA of some different ways you could pull different reports to look at them. I'm not going to spend time reading it to you, but when you look at your final numbers on your reports in the ledger, they're going to look like, and I kind of did show you some query that you would pull. This is your payroll report. You see, if I run that report and ask for payroll expenditures out of the ledger, and then if I go to human resources and ask who's been paid out of the same fund, it's the same amount of dollars that's in the ledger. So it's kind of like an invoice and a statement. If you get a statement from whomever and it says you owe $112,000, well, I didn't spend that much at, you know, Walmart or whoever. I want to see all the invoices and all the tickets and everything I charged to my credit card or whatever to see that detail. That's your detail. And I even thought of a few more reports that I could add to it. But again, and you're welcome to call me or email me anytime, or any of our staff, and you have that 800 number. We've got I think 12 people on our staff right now. I've been with the department with AppScan 25 years, and that's the most people I've ever had working at one time. I'm not sure what that says, good or bad, but it's wonderful. And we got some sharp, young people that are working hard. And I mean, they go through the ringer to learn. You can just imagine if they didn't come from a school district, a year and 2 year learning curve. And so don't be embarrassed to call and ask them, because in essence, you're helping me train my people. Because if you don't have any problems, I don't have anything for them to work on, because I can only teach them so much. You know, I tell them it, they don't believe it. You know, they're so sharp and smart. They don't believe it that it's going to be a 1.5 year to a 2 year learning curve. And I think if I could open up a spout on top of your head and start pouring it in, you still couldn't remember it. It's going to overflow. So I can give them a big overview and I can make them work with play case scenarios. But when you start giving them your real problems, your real research, and they have to figure things out, that's when they start really learning. And then they'll become expert at it because their spectrum is not as broad as yours. And, you know, they've got 1 million things to do and they've got 500,000. So I thank you for helping train them. So to summarize, I would say, you know, our first thing, everything we do in life, we have to have a plan. And what is your plan for most of you? It's a financial plan. It's your budget. I have 4 kids, and when all my kids come home for Christmas and grandkids and spouses, you know, I'm making a plan way long a week before Christmas when they get there. and I write down my Christmas menu of what I'm cooking for that big meal. And I go to the store and I buy all my groceries. And if I don't buy celery, I can't make my dressing. Or, you know, if somebody comes in and they want something that I didn't have on the menu. So your budget is kind of, like I told you, I have to dumb this down for me. Your budget's kind of the same way. What you're looking at the beginning of the year is your plan. You've got to think of everything. And you can't, if one of the kids comes in and my daughter from California just might do this. Oh, Mom, my roommate from whatever, and her, you know, her husband and 2 kids are here visiting their mom in Springdale, and they're going to come down and have dinner with us. And I thought, oh, okay, 4 more. You can't throw that extra person in on your payroll or pay them out of somewhere. You got to stick with your plan. You got to communicate that plan with your business manager. And you got to review those reports, because your business manager is pulled in every different direction, just like you are. So you're the experts, and I have seen today how much more you have to remember than I do. Make sure that not only you and your business manager and federal programs, and you know, even then you bring PACSCAN in the bunch to help you, and anybody else. Make sure that we're all on the same plan and that we're reviewing that plan. I can't tell you how important it is. And if you would like, program people, if you would like your own login to look at your own reports, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, then have them. I put the menu path up there for those few reports. I mean, 4 or 5 reports. If your business manager doesn't have time to print those for you every month and you would like to look at it every month, then you could learn to print your own, or she probably would be glad to send them to you once a month, he or she. Coding changes and updates. I have a note that, you know, that memo comes out March the 31st every year. By law, we try to give you 90 days notice of any changes. And there was a little discussion on this where you're getting all the negatives and errors where you have 0 budget and you spent money. And you know, I'm real black and white because I'm numbers. And I have sympathy for you, and I understand how that happens. But if you made a good plan, why are you spending money where you have no budget? And I say, I'm just black and white. And I know I don't know all the reasons why. And I know it's hard to estimate benefits to go with all that. Personnel budgeting does it real well, as far as I know. But we'll take another look at that. And so far right now, that is just giving you exceptions on 6501 and not those other 7 or 8 federal funds that are reimbursed. You can give me credit for that, that you're not getting errors on all those, because I dropped the ball on that. I was supposed to have that edited out for all of them by as soon as last year began. But I had this great idea. We'll break it to them with 6501, and we'll get it used to 6501, and I'll give them a month to do, and my people are going to call everybody and work with them, and then I'm going to roll it out for the next. I forgot. I just plain forgot. I dropped the ball. So that will be a reminder in your coding memo that's coming out March 31st. And it seems like I have a lot of things coming out. Not big things, but a few things that might give you a little heartburn this year. That's all I can think of. Let's see what this is just a little more detailed document on your federal transfers for the funds that are allowed for those different funds. I think it's an attachment out there too. If you didn't get a separate document, which would be easier to read than what's on the slide, on the menu paths for the reports or for this, I'd be happy to send it to you if you email me. Now, any questions or you want to throw anything at me, we'll go right ahead.
Told me again about that March 30th.
There's a commissioner's memo comes out every year by law. It has to be out April the 1st. So we usually post it March 31st. So I've got a long running list of everything that's been changing in the coding specs, and people have probably been calling you and saying, we found this to be a problem. Actually, I'm submitting my federal report right now. This might give some of you joy that I have a cycle to submit just like you do. It's only once a year, but it's a big cycle that I call it my cycle that I submit to the feds. And when I upload it to their system, it takes me from the time I get that data in September. March 1st is my deadline to get that in. When my cycle comes back, I don't have validation errors as such by name, but on the web page where that's loaded, it has big red blocks right across there, and it has critical errors must be fixed or explained. And so if you've coded something different from last year, or there's more than a different line items have different variances, 10% or whatever, if suddenly, and I'll tell you one of the ones I had this year that I'm working on right now, and some of you may be getting some calls, is on severance tax. Very seldom do we have any trouble with revenue. It'll jump out. But there were about 15 districts who coded a good amount of severance tax this year that wasn't coded last year. So all those are kicking out, and I've got to say, okay, why did you have $37,000 worth of severance tax money this year as opposed to last year? So then I have to drill down and find all the districts that are and call and find out was it really severance tax or was it a mistake? So sometimes when I find things late in the year, coding changes, some things like that will be, okay, I've got to fix this for next year, stop up that hole. But that memo will be out April the 1st. If any of Ms. Kaufman's people or federal programs, if you see, or any of you have ideas of changes or edits or validation errors I could put in that would help you find stuff. I mean, I know it's not a delight to go out there and see 500 of them, but it's better than waiting until you get to the end and finding it. I'll be glad to add to it as well. Mhm.
Thank you for all the time.
Thank you. I thank you for inviting me, and I thank Ms. Kaufman for encouraging me to be here to support you, because the bottom line, we're all trying to do that without what at the bottom or top tier. None of us would have a job. You're all trying to serve out there on the front lines, your federal programmers and your people who are helping you to serve your students, and business managers in my office, and the same thing. We just want you to have to do a better job to serve your students. Thank you.
So Kathleen brought up a really important notice when she said a while ago that maybe she speaks one language, but our students are counting on all the adults figuring out these different languages to speak their language. And their language is the language of learning and success. That's why they come to school every day. So that's why we wanted to come together today to start that joint conversation of, yes, we're speaking numbers over here, and we're speaking applications and forms and school improvement plans and all of these different things, but they have to come together for one common purpose. So Kathleen, I think this is your crew of people that can help. If you need them, please feel free to call them. I think that's a common message that you're hearing from us. We want to help you before you make a mess. Let us help you, because it's faster and easier to clean it up before it gets big and messy, right? So if you just wonder, just ask. Coming back to our original work here, we talked about timelines. And so those abscon periods, you see those dates in here, that how important they are. Another place where we have to be talking together is on our cycle submissions. And when those cycle submissions close, that data are going into our standards for accreditation tool that's reading whether or not your school district is accredited. It's going into your school report card. Some of it's going into your ESSA school index. And if people are making mistakes and we're not all communicating, then those things are going to be recorded and closed. As you said, we are closing the vault on these things, and then you live with those mistakes reported publicly forever. So it's just so important. I cannot stress to you enough that we do need to speak a common language so that if we find things that just don't feel right, we speak up and talk to each other. So if Kathleen sees things going through and she sees somebody's out there buying lawn furniture with Title I funds, she needs to call somebody, right? Amy's paying reimbursements. If she sees lawn furniture coming, she's going to pick up the phone and go, Jane, I think you better get over there. Somebody's buying lawn furniture. It takes all of us. It takes the village to try to keep everything going correctly. And I know no one meant to buy lawn furniture, and it's not allowable or necessary. So, but that's just one example. We send money back to the feds every year. Federal funds are returned. So what that says, Dr. Hernandez, is when you go to the legislature and you say, our school districts need more funding, and they look at this report and they say, but you're sending money back. It doesn't really match, does it? So it's critical that we're talking together about what's going on with these federal funds. What we're spending should match what we planned for, because what we planned for is what our needs assessment told us our kids needed in order to achieve. So it does all fit together. And we do need to speak each other's languages. So I'm going to ask you once again to think about two things. What questions do you have? What supports do you need? Today you heard a lot of information. What could we do to help you? I know we have people that have been on the job for some number of years, and likewise we have people that are just starting some of these jobs. So we need to hear from you what you need. So any questions before we take a break and get ready to hear from Cabot School District?